おはよう。俺はチンチン大好きなんだよ。Welcome to Negotiated Management.
Hello, hello.
You are looking mighty fine today. You don't look at all as if your head had been cut off by a katana.
I feel rejuvenated. You know, like some weight's been lifted off my chest.
Some weight has been lifted off of your shoulders, I'd say.
Oh, maybe. Some weight's been lifted off the economy.
Mm-hmm. You know who hasn't, who probably isn't feeling too well right now? Victor King, the Connecticut man, the landlord who got his head cut off by a tenant over a rental dispute.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, so...
what a way to lose his mind.
Freaking story. Yeah, Victor King, a 64-year-old champion bridge player.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very famous in the community. Was found badly slashed and covered by a sheet in his Hartford Asylum Hill home on Sunday. The day after he went to the police to say his tenant had been threatening him over the rent and waving a sword at him. So, the landlord was trying to evict him during the pandemic, right? Because landlords have bills. It's hard to be a landlord.
You know, you gotta afford that second yacht.
Mm-hmm. I mean, just look at him, though. He's got his waspy polo, and it looks like he's been out at the sun, in the sun, tanning for a little bit of that lobster skin.
Mm-hmm.
He's been at the Hamptons, and he hasn't. Is that like a Generation 1 iPhone?
Maybe. He looks like the kind of person...
You can afford better phone.
I mean, I know we're making fun of a dead person, but like, I mean, he looks like the kind of person that if he were to like drop your ball...
But he's a landlord.
Yes, exactly.
He's not a person.
He looks like the kind of person that if you drop your ball in his yard, like your basketball, he'd stab it with a knife and tell you not to fucking put your shit on his property.
And then he's probably those people who put nails in his shoes when he comes in for the inspection on your way out.
Oh yeah, like
and then he scratches the floor and takes that out of your deposit.
Oh yeah,
he has a hidden trap door in his shoes.
Hidden trap door.
Look at that scratch. I'm going to need your entire deposit.
Yep. Oh man, I got.
Probably post on these landlord Facebook groups like, please help me. My tenant watches a lot of anime and he brought out a katana last time I was over. I really need to evict him though. So what should I do? So someone in the comments says, you must train in the art of the ninja. Only a ninja can defeat a samurai. And then it's like an anime battle.
And then, but he wasn't prepared when he challenged his tenant.
Mm-hmm.
He only took like a day. He watched some like YouTube videos about it, and he was like...
He didn't hone his, disguise jutsu. Mm-hmm. He disguised himself as like a not landlord.
While you were studying the art of rental production, I was studying the blade.
But you were studying eviction courts and landlord-tenant laws. I was studying the blade.
And then, like, as he gets like decapitated, the guy's like, "Hey, don't lose your head." Anyway,
the landlord, he teleports behind the landlord. Nothing personal.
No, it's all personal. You should have just let me live rent free. Anyway,
Hey, what's the guy's name?
Fucking what? The stabber or
the ninja.
Oh, the actual ninja was Jerry David Thompson. This guy actually isn't that. This guy is actually like kind of an asshole because he's one of those sovereign citizen people.
Jerry Thompson?
Yeah, Jerry Thompson.
Sovereign ninja.
A sovereign ninja who has
sovereign eye.
Yeah,
like a
sovereign eye. A sovereign eye.
Sovereign eye. Samurai.
Yeah, he has all the protection of an American citizen, but he doesn't have to follow any of the laws, apparently. Nope. So this guy, he's
actually Japanese.
He's actually Japanese, yes. This African-American man is actually fully Japanese. Anyway.
Yeah, what's that story about that slave who became like one of the best samurai of all of Japan?
Well, he wasn't the best samurai. He was there for a little bit, and then they brought him back to Europe, and he became a slave again, and we never heard from him again.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah.
This guy's runner-up for Samurai of the Week.
Samurai of the Week.
Yeah, it's gonna be our new bit. Samurai of the Week.
But yeah, so this guy, when they found him, he was in his car, and he basically had it in his glove compartment saying that he was a sovereign citizen.
Oh my god.
And he claims that he has refused to speak to the police or a public defendant. So this guy's probably going to go to jail for life. Remember, you have rights as a tenant, but as shitty as it is, please don't go killing your landlords.
Not yet.
Not yet, at least. Once the revolution happens, as a joke, I'm saying this as a joke, but once the revolution happens, the landlords get the wall.
Join us next week when we dethrone God and destroy America.
Anyway, what else has been happening this week? Let's see. We got a lot to cover.
Yeah.
So
Portland's been heating up.
CIA tactics that have been used in Hong Kong are now being brought back to haunt the police in America. Portland moms, try to protest and protect their children, and police don't give a shit. What else has been happening? Shit. Oh yeah, now police are throwing protesters in unmarked vans in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
As well, nearly 50, 60, 80 miles away from us. Actually. 40 miles? Who knows? We're not telling you where we are, so you can't trace us.
Yeah. Do we have any?
Nope.
We're not going to talk about Hank Yu, right?
No. Oh, yeah. Let's talk about Hank Yu. We're going to talk about Hank Yu for a little bit.
An old friend.
An old friend of ours. A frenemy.
Frenemy.
Of ours.
So why don't you start off by telling us who Hank Yu is?
Hank Yu. All right. Hank Yu is the best way to describe him is an Asian Confederate Nazi. Okay, he is a Korean immigrant raised by a single mother, deadbeat father, in his own words, and he absolutely believes he was raised in Jersey, but he is absolutely in denial of it and thinks that he's from the South. When I ran into him, every time I've met him, he puts on this really fake Southern accent. And a couple years ago, and he was also in ROTC, one of the worst establishments in the world, and he got kicked out.
Remember when we broke into the ROTC building?
Yeah, good times. But yeah,
in Minecraft,
of course. The ROTC Minecraft server. But no, in actuality, this guy is fucking insane. Believe that, the Civil War was caused by the Jews, or as he said, the Jews.
Damn Jews.
Yeah. Thinks that, single women are all whores. And then when someone pointed out to him that his own mom is a single mother, he said, yeah, she's a whore, or she's a whore. And a couple years ago, he got arrested for armed robbery with a machete in the South, in Texas, of all places. And now he's getting deported back to Korea. Turns out he wasn't even an American citizen.
How was he allowed in ROTC then?
Well, you can still join ROTC as non-citizen, and what they'll do is they'll give you citizenship after you become an officer.
Oh, nice. Like a, what is it? What do they call it?
Like a citizenship for blood.
Yeah.
But so yeah, he got kicked out of ROTC, and then he posted that he was going that fuck ROTC. They have no respect. That I'll never salute an ROTC officer. Blah blah blah. Even though you can't tell the fucking difference between them. Then claims that he's going to go down to Texas and join the army there. Right? Goes down to Texas. Yes. Goes down to Texas Army. Thinking that they wouldn't have it on record that he's been kicked out of ROTC. But they do. So he gets kicked out of the army, he gets kicked out, he doesn't get accepted by the army, doesn't get accepted by the Marine Corps, the fucking Navy, the Coasties, the Air Force, tries all of them, none of it works. He robs a store, goes to jail, now he's being deported.
Amazing. Where's he being deported to?
Korea.
Can he join the army? Did he skip out on the Korean army?
Probably.
I know they're supposed to do that.
Probably.
I know they beat the shit out of you there, too.
Yeah, I remember.
I feel insubordinate.
Yeah, so what they'll do is to impress American soldiers, while the Korean officers will run their men until they collapse in front of the Americans. And then once you collapse, they'll start beating the shit out of you.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
That's horrible. And they're all conscripts.
Yeah, they're all conscripts, so who gives a shit if they're sad about the fact that you're beating the shit out of them?
Yeah, true. I mean, they don't get...
You don't give a fuck.
I mean, it's still remnants from when Korea was a right-wing dictatorship that we put in.
I mean, isn't it still?
Yeah, pretty much. It's an American colony.
Yeah, the ex-prime minister was like part of some religious cult.
Yeah.
It turned out. And the new guy isn't much better.
It's crazy, we literally installed a right-wing dictatorship. Yeah. And they're essentially our little colony.
Yeah. It's just South Korea is just one giant American base. So
yeah, pretty much. And speaking of American troops, we recently pulled out of Germany today.
Oh, really? What happened with that? That's breaking news.
But they're bringing 6,000 soldiers back home, and I think they're deploying more assets to Poland to kind of practice brinksmanship with Russia.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Speaking of brinksmanship, Israel.
Oh, yeah. What about Israel?
Israel bombed Iran, and they're trying to incite, basically, conflict with Iran. Sort of like what we did when we killed Soleimani.
Yeah, I remember that. We had a whole episode about that.
Yeah. And, like we predicted, Iran had to respond in some manner, and they did. They fucking bombed a couple of American bases.
And then they proved that plane that was being harassed by fighter jets, that was an American fighter jet over Syria that was harassing a Iranian plane.
Yep, that's true. So now we get to see what happens in Iran. So hopefully,
Yeah, remember less than 6 months ago, we were literally about to go to war with them?
Yeah.
Like, they were actually they shot rockets and severely wounded 70 soldiers.
Mm-hmm. And
yeah, there's videos. Should we play a video of that?
Yeah, let's put, why don't we go on break? One thing that I find fascinating is I was talking to one of my friends about this. Right? Mm-hmm. She's Israeli and, very strongly in support of Israel, right? Not as strong as the super right-wing people who say basically we should just kill all the Muslims.
She's like those people who are protesting, thousands and thousands of people who are protesting Netanyahu right now outside of the the Israeli, what is the governmental headquarters?
Yeah, she believes that Israel can be reformed into a two-state, right? Like a two-state policy.
Yeah, or even a single state, and they pretty much are a single state.
They are a single state, right? That's the whole point.
It's just
but either way, she believes that when I talked about her words were, "Oh yeah, Iran threatened us. They talked about bombing us and destroying us, so we blew them up. Fuck around and find out." And I made a point to her. That it's no matter how much someone threatens you, if you strike first, you're the bad guy.
I'm the bad guy.
I'm the bad guy. It would be the same if Syria can threaten America all they want, but if America invades Syria over a threat, Syria being oh, fuck America, we're going to wipe you off.
Syria.
Yeah, we did. But officially, we would be the bad guys, and we're always the bad guys.
Yeah. And then even the...
Well, I put it in reverse there. I said, if Israel says that they're going to wipe Iran off the face of the earth, but not actually shoot missiles, and then Iran goes and fucking nukes Israel, Iran would be the bad guy on the world news. Everyone would be saying it. But because it's Israel, and Western media and the fucking Republicans and Trump and America and all the Western nations fucking love Israel, Israel's not the bad guy. Right?
Yeah. Well, that's because we have APEC.
Yeah, that's because we have...
I was trying a documentary for them, too. And it was weird because they just hired, freelancers, and even the producers were freelancers. The producer was just yeah, I don't even know what APEC is. They just pay us. And they do. It was $30 an hour just to be an assistant cameraman.
Wow. Damn. That's not bad.
I know. If COVID didn't hit, I would have shot a documentary then, too, for I forget what it was. It was some British news station. They were doing election coverage, and then the whole world started ending. But I feel like I dodged a bullet with the Local 600. That's the camera union. Mm-hmm. It's a shitty craft union.
A shitty craft union.
I've never heard of a union outside of film that actively encourages scabbing on your own.
I was going to say, is this a union that scabs because they all just work freelance part-time?
Yeah, so if you don't have a union job, you don't get it from the guild. I'm going to call it a guild. You just work under an alias, or you just overtly work with everyone else on non-union films just because you can. And the union encourages this.
That's fucking bullshit.
The union is literally run by Ari. So they only hire people from Ari, or people who work at Ari's rental house or are always there. So I was planning, I did get a job at Ari's rental house, and I was working on some documentaries, but then COVID hit. But yeah, Ari pretty much... You only get hired to the local 600 if you work for ARI. So it's essentially a company union, too.
That's gross.
A company craft union.
Craft union, not the craft beer kind.
No. Yeah, film unions are... The whole film industry is way out there. No, repping the brand. See my hat? Passion Flicks?
Yeah, I didn't want to...
That's Tosca and Musk's film production company.
Yeah, I didn't want to say anything. I wasn't going to lie. I thought that was a porn company when I saw the hat. So.
She does romance. She's the Martin Scorsese of romance novels.
The Martin Scorsese.
Yeah, so...
It's like very smutty, sort of always constantly teasing and a disappointing end.
Can you imagine that apartheid blood diamonds and gems manifested and expressed themselves in America as smut? Like all the toils of South Africans finally expresses itself as some edgy moron Reddit billionaire and someone who directs smut.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, that's where all the billions.
I mean, like, what,
blood diamonds went.
You got so much money, like, what else are you going to spend it on?
Yeah, gentrifying Mars and direct porn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So, what are we going to talk about now?
Well, we're going to take a quick break.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to discuss the actual news, which is Portland. And the
What's happening
rise
in Portland?
Fascism. I mean, we are seeing American fascism happening.
No, it's not fascism. It's what do they call it? Performative authoritarianism.
Yeah, whatever.
Or what is it? You can call it
stability.
Putin-esque dictatorship.
Putin-esque. Oh,
yeah.
Why don't we just call it Trump-esque or American-esque
dictatorship? Right, or we can call it a corporatocracy.
Corporatocracy, that's great as
because
well.
all that's at issue is Trump running the economy and Trump running the government. You get Trump out and put Joe Biden in, we can get woke financial capitalism,
yes.
and then everything will be solved.
Yes. You see, we're not against the federal police who are hired. Sorry, we're not against like contractors throwing people into unmarked vans. What we really want,
they're anarchists.
More black female secret police.
Yeah. Right? They're all
more black female secret police.
Like, we're tankies, so anarchists don't matter anyway.
Yep.
So that's why I'm voting for Joe Biden. Right?
Yeah.
Just throw them all in the vans.
Yeah, fuck it. What? Fuck it. You know, just
when the cops come to our house, I'll just be like, don't worry. I'm a Marxist. I'm not an anarchist. He's over there.
He's over there.
Yeah.
You know what? Fuck it. Like, just vote for Trump. Like, the sooner America collapses, the sooner we can rebuild it.
I know, right? Are you an accelerationist now?
Yeah, I'm a postmodernist, acceleration, Posadist, whatever the fuck.
Yeah, I mean, we could sit bored and work on podcasts, or we can just, like, accelerate the collapse of America.
Yeah, you know what? Like, fuck it. Just cut power lines.
With Joe Biden, it's not about, like, increasing aggregate demand or stimulating the economy. You just got to increase production. Mm-hmm. And Trump is stifling production by allowing these anarchists to run amok.
Exactly.
Burning down old buildings.
I'll tell you what, Jack.
If I had... Build those buildings.
Like, if I had 3 pence to a honey bee, I'd be able to build those buildings just like back in the old days.
Back in the day, all it took was a little elbow grease and lickety-split. You had your chicken coop up in your backyard.
Yep, you just had to pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Exactly, Jack.
Yes. Now come here, granddaughter, and kiss me.
Okay.
All right, we'll be back right after this break.
Yep.
Holy God.
There are around 1,500 US coalition troops on Al-Assad airbase. They had just minutes to take cover.
The shockwave just rolled even through these T-walls.
Sergeant Dane Kasaga told us he was flying a drone that night with orders to stay at his place and not take cover. He says he owes his life to these blast walls.
I'm very grateful for this piece of concrete and wrought iron steel.
This is what Iran's ballistic missiles did to metal. Imagine what they could have done to US troops if they hadn't taken cover.
One of the missiles was a direct hit on Chief Warrant Officer Alexander Bender's living quarters.
That was the door, is that right over there?
Yeah, so that was the door. I had a bunk here.
Hang on to this.
This fleece somehow survived, now scarred by shrapnel.
That's a souvenir from the Iranians.
Yep, sure is.
The US troops hunkered down in bunkers that night, but most weren't designed to withstand a direct hit from a ballistic missile strike.
We huddled together and held one another.
This is Senior Airman Mary Catherine Mulholland's first ever tour of duty.
I still can't fathom that no one was hurt.
There's been speculation that Iran deliberately missed American troops to prevent a further escalation.
Sleep.
All right, we're back. So let's get on to the main topic of this week, which is Portland. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that the
Sorry, do I smell? Sorry, do I
yes,
smell?
you do actually. You smell like greedy capitalism.
All right, I have a job.
Yeah, exactly. You have a job. You fucking dirty capitalist, selling your wage labor.
Supplementing the working class.
Supplementing the working
No,
class.
lamenting.
So what I want to talk about is Portland, right? And the evolution of the Portland protests.
Yeah.
And how it really, really brings back the phrase, the revolution will not be broadcast, right? Because it isn't. I mean, the media isn't going to talk about what's happening in Portland, especially not the fact that the tactics have evolved.
Who is the media, too?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in a little bit, we'll talk about Bellingcat. Because remember we had that episode about Iran? Bellingcat's back.
Oh, shit. All right, let's talk about that. But anyway, so recently, this week in Portland, well, within the last week, as you know, unmarked police vehicles have been, with police that have no markings on, have been arresting protesters. Yeah, arresting protesters and throwing them into unmarked vans, right?
Mm-hmm.
The scary part is, we still don't know where those protesters are once they've been arrested. Like, they just disappeared.
Mm.
Right? There's been no arrests given to them. There's been no warrants, right? I think only like a couple of them got out, and they were told that they would that like part of being released was promising not to protest anymore.
Yeah, because I mean we're going to do it a little bit, but these aren't cops arresting them.
Yeah. So you want to talk about that now?
Well, yeah. So the reason why they're being arrested and thrown in unmarked vans and being driven back to the courthouse and being basically intimidated by these security guards at the courthouse. And these aren't just security guards. These are the Federal Protective Services. And also Customs and Border Patrol show up too. But most of them are Federal Protective Services.
Yeah.
Right?
Federal civilian agents.
Yes. But they're not necessarily civilians because the Federal Protective Services, the vast majority of their agents, I think the totality of them, are contractors.
Yes.
So there's two contractors in Oakland. If we're going to go back there to like June 1st, they were hired by Paragon Security Systems, right? And Paragon Security Systems is a private security company or private contractor.
Or triple canopy, which is the sort of every couple of years Blackwater shoots a civilian, so they have to change their name. So
every war crime that Blackwater commits, they change the name. It used to be Academy, and then now it's Constellus, and now Constellus has subgroups. Triple Canopy is part of Constellus, the Constellus not subcontractor, but a constituent corporation. Yeah. So it's for taxes. So then they could put all the costs on Triple Canopy and then take taxes off when they pay Blackwater. So it's just a tax loophole.
Okay.
That's how like landlords get through. They start an LLC. It's like an LLC for Blackwater.
Okay.
But they also have Onyx Group, Olive Group, all these different private military contractors. But a lot of people are saying like Paragon of people in the olive drab. But you go in the past and you look at like security guards at federal courthouses pushing old people over and beating them in the head and shooting them with tasers. Apparently it happens a lot. But Paragon Security Services are always really fat. They hire the fat mall cops that are at like the front of the courthouses and that kind of just run the x-ray machine. But Triple Canopy is one of the largest defense contractors for the Federal Protective Services. And with them, they operate, if you go on like LinkedIn and look up all the operators under Triple Canopy, they have experience in academy, and Triple Canopy also contracts out with the U.S. Army in Kuwait. They run security around the base. They guard convoys and the ammo depot and scan troops in and out. They kind of supplement the military police or replace the military police on base in like Kuwait and Iraq and Afghanistan. And also, interestingly enough, Operators for Triple Canopy. There's a job opening right now for a counterintelligence agent in Afghanistan, and your duties are to run the counterintelligence service in Afghanistan right now, and pretty much act as a manager for all of JSOC, or Joint Special Operations Committee, JSOC.
Whatever the fuck.
You know what JSOC is. But so, Triple Canopy, they'll hire operators specifically who have Special Operation Force background, and they're private security contractors that run our counterintelligence service in Afghanistan. And so they're the ones setting up the Green Berets. They're the ones scalping Afghani children and giving the CIA data on wedding caravans to bomb. So they are the forefront of, or they are the primary force behind our drone campaign. But now, if you look at all the operators who work in Portland and work for the Federal Protective Service, they have backgrounds on LinkedIn. Like, there's one guy, his name's Miguel. He lives in Portland, and he works for the Federal Protective Service. He's probably there at the courthouse right now. He has background with academy in Blackwater listed on his LinkedIn. And he also has experience in the U.S. Army in special operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. So all of these security guards that are at the courthouse right now, they operate kind of as a quick reaction force. So we know from like Iraq, you would have your standard U.S. Army troops on the patrols and hunter-killer squads. And so they would seek out and find the enemy, and a quick reaction force would flank and come around and respond to threats. And they would be like the Rangers, or they would be the higher trained breakthrough element of the group. So these quick reaction forces are like the special ops of the Federal Protective Services. They're like the SWAT team for the Federal Protective Services.
Yep.
And so these are military contractors, and these are people that have special operation forces or force backgrounds. But like, they're not really contractors if we've entirely privatized our federal police force. Because even Customs and Border Patrol and the U.S. Marshals are almost not all of Customs and Border Patrol, but a lot of their agents are privatized. U.S. Marshals is almost entirely run by academy and or Constellas now. So we've entirely privatized our federal police services. And it's incredible to think how widespread this is, because the federal government has 70 different police agencies. So like the EPA has a police agency. Mm-hmm. The FDA has a police agency who goes around like finding farmers putting more than 5 fruits in their jam, sending SWAT teams into their barns to go arrest them.
Yeah, hell, even NASA has their own police agency.
Well, that makes sense, because they were shooting rockets. But I mean, like, Federal Drug Administration, or I forget what it's called, something with a D. But they have their own SWAT teams too. And the EPA has their own SWAT teams.
Fascists has their own.
Yeah.
USPS.
Yeah. And do you think Social Security has their own SWAT team? Like,
probably.
Like if some old person's committing Social Security fraud, they're gonna go no-knock raid them?
No-knock raid. Get on the ground, get on the ground.
In Alaska.
Oh, don't shoot, honey.
In Alaska, there was
an old
case.
man. Oh, please.
Get on the fucking ground, old man.
Oh, please.
You got a gun. That'll teach you to deposit your checks in the wrong account.
But I just wanted an extra $50 a month.
I just wanted to play bridge with my friends down at the country club.
Oh, geez, please don't do this. I'm 95 years old.
But one specific case, back in 2013, so this is a long-standing problem with the federal government overstepping its boundaries or jurisdiction of
like
arrests.
they always do.
Well, not always. Back before 2011, it was... But you had the FBI and the ATF. I mean, like, that's when it was really prevalent with the Davidians and the white supremacists out in Washington or Idaho or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, although like you've always the government always
bombing. Well, no, the move bombing was the Philadelphia police.
I was gonna say like the bombing of Black Harlem.
Yeah, but it was always local police. But now
you're right. That was.
We talked about this in our past episodes, but we've kind of transitioned to a unilateral federal trans-state police force or domestic paramilitary. And one specific case in Alaska in 2013, the EPA sent their SWAT team to an Alaskan gold mine to supposedly look at the chaff the gold miners were pulling up. And these were just regular ass gold miners. They were just going to check a permit. But they sent in SWAT teams and tanks to this guy's mine, and he comes back and he has an AR to his head, and he's put on the ground. And they hold him at gunpoint while they check his permit. And their reasoning for sending a SWAT team out just for checking a mine permit, was because they thought there were drug dealers and bandits and poachers out in the Alaskan wilderness.
No, so they had to protect themselves?
Yeah, so they had to protect themselves from drug dealers and terrorists.
You know what the actual reason?
Out in the fucking Yukon.
Yeah. You know what the actual reason is? And I'm going to sound like fucking Alex Jones right now, but the actual reason that they're doing that is because they need to have it on their paperwork that they have been utilizing these assets. Right? If you don't use the assets, the next time budget checks come around, that asset is going to get cut if you don't use it.
And also, they probably do honestly believe that there's some, that the Taliban has a training camp in the Yukon.
No, you know what?
You know Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller definitely believes that.
Here's an example. When I was in the military, right, one of the things that we would always do is whenever you go to the range, right, you always ask for more ammo than you need. And at the end of the range day shooting, if you have any leftover ammo, you shoot all of it. Just fucking whatever. Just fucking blow all that ammo after shooting it into the air, even if you have to, right? Because if you don't use that ammo, next time you ask for ammo, they're going to give you less. So I think that's actually what's happening. This is why the fucking government is so bloated and wasteful. Because every time you ask for, the SWAT team in Alaska, if you don't use it, you lose it. Use it or lose it.
Yeah. But why do we need a SWAT team in Alaska?
Because it's fucking dope, and most likely it'll probably make some officer look nice.
Yeah, true.
Officer successfully utilized and implemented the effective firepower of whatever fucking federal forces.
Yeah, that's why, in our own, the other episode, they had the heat badges, because, I want to be like Al Pacino. Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Fucking Al Pacino, baby. But, we want to talk about the federal bureaucracy. Something I learned yesterday. I was trying to find out when the reauthorization for the Homeland Security comes up again. And there was a bill for the Appropriations Act in Congress in 2017. And it never got passed. No, it was a reauthorization bill that never got passed. And I was trying to find out why the House version of the bill never went to the Senate. And it turns out that there hasn't been a reauthorization provision in the Homeland Security Act at all. Like with the Patriot Act and I think the AUMF has a reauthorization provision in it, or sundown laws. So the entire Department of Homeland Security is one long-lasting institution that has no provision for its cancelization, like the Patriot Act does. So you always see Democrats voting for the Patriot Act, and we always put blame on it. But the Department of Homeland Security is literally embedded in the fabric of our federal institution. There is no reauthorization for it. It's a bona fide integral part, and it's gonna last for the rest of the time America's standing.
And the thing about the Department of Homeland Security is that it was always going to inevitably turn inwards, right? Homeland Security is designed to find terrorist threats, right? That was after post 9/11. Post 9/11 designed to find terrorist threats, right? But when an organization only exists if it can find threats, eventually it's going to start making up threats to justify its existence, right? And we're seeing that happen today with the designation of Antifa as terrorist threats, right? You see our own government increasingly turning inwards, right?
And so when you have these neo-reactionary fascists in power, they're going to make up threats for their own political enemies. That's why we're seeing anarchists being we're going to have new Palmer raids.
Yep.
And we talked about that in episode 2.
Yeah. And this is something that actually Marx predicted this, right? Marx predicted that...
we're going down that track. It's bad, but we told you so.
Yeah, why? We told you so.
I'm still kind of
going to happen, but...
I'm still slightly perturbed that it's actually happening in my lifetime. I thought I was going to be 80 years old when
this happened. No, I mean, I knew since I I mean, I don't want to sound like a fucking edgelord, but like, well, I remember being like 17.
Well, I remember being 16 and saying 2020 is going to be a whack-ass yeir.
All right, sure.
I wrote that in my journal. I can go back and find that. I knew from the beginning, and I did nothing about it.
No, true story though. In all seriousness, true story. I remember when I was 17, and I was part of an environmental group, right? And it's like a high school. It's like some fucking bullshit high school environmental group, right? And I remember, like, fucking like trying to doing research about like protecting the environment, and everything pointed back towards like big corporations fucking us over, and like it's not profitable to save the environment, blah blah blah. And I remember thinking to myself like, wow, we're fucking screwed as long as we care more about the environment than more about the bottom line of the environment. And it's basically true. But the point is, Marx predicted in his, in I believe it was Das Kapital, that
Capital. El Capital.
Das Kapital. Listen,
now.
I read Das Kapital in the original German, so I'm more of a communist than you. Yes. But anyway, so the point is...
Leer El Capital.
Fucking gross. Anyway, so he predicted himself that as like capitalist nations expand, right? Like capitalism has to like increasingly expand. Like it can never be stagnant.
Yes.
It has to expand. But it's going to reach a point eventually where they can't expand. Right? Either because of competition or because there's really no more market.
Or the rate of profits always has a tendency to fall.
Exactly. Like there's only so much profit you can squeeze out of something, right?
So, but
once it happens, right? You're going to see that, like, the oppression that America or whatever country was fucking applying outwards is then going to start being applying inwards. Mm-hmm. And the same tactics and resources that are used outwards are now being applied inwards, right?
Domestic imperialism.
Yes. And I think that if the protests continue, right, because like we said earlier, the federal government is trying to see what do we have to do to stop the protests, right? If we just ignore it, will it go away? No, it didn't. So now let's try, sending out police and just standing around menacingly. Didn't work. All right, now let's try batons. Didn't work. All right, now let's try tear gas. That's not working. When will they shoot? Mm-hmm. When will they open fire with live weapons?
Yeah, technically.
Right? I mean, like, not like fucking rubber bullets, but actual bullets.
Probably next week. I mean, we're seeing it happen again and again. And the Democrats, the Republicans support this, and the Democrats support this as well, right? I mean, just last week, there was a budget proposal by Bernie Sanders, bless his soul, to cut the budget by just 10%, right? 10% off the entire Pentagon budget, which is only $74 billion, which in the American government is a fucking drop in the bucket, right? Yeah.
Twice it was fucking turned down. And it wasn't just like voted against by Republicans, it was voted no by Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
So we're seeing increasingly that when the government is incapable of taking care of its own people, of providing the basic needs, then they were increasingly rely on force to oppress the people, right, and to keep the people down. So this is the dark path of capitalism.
Well, I mean, even the extent of the Democrats' policy doesn't even consider like increasing demand by public spending and stimulating the economy that way. They're still reliant on bolstering finance capitalism and under this idea that like by increasing production, we're going to increase the well-being because prices are going to go down. And they will if we do increase production for a little bit. And overall, the costs are still lower and you can still increase the production and still lower the cost of goods. But there's still no baseline spending for, just everyday Americans and just literal costs of living.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that the average American is paying is $600.
Yeah, and even in the most recent bill, they're still earmarking like billions of dollars for defense. And even with the Department of Homeland Security, like every major like omnibus bill that's passed, they're still earmarking little things for Homeland Security. Like
30 billion.
Social, was it the Secret Service gets new like Humvees, and FPS gets a new contract with Costellas. But you earmark it on thousands of different bills because there's no structure for like the reauthorization of any program in DHS. Like I said, it's infused in our entire fabric of like Congress and our legislature.
It's like
that's
just
so.
Just yesterday they were talking about like some random budget increase for the government, and they just gave $30 billion to the Pentagon for an F-30 fighter jet, whatever the fuck bullshit they want to make, right? $30 million gift.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it happen. But anyway, going back to Portland, though.
Yeah, let's go back there.
Mm-hmm.
So the FPS, they were arresting people, and we know that tactic of intimidating people is directly pulled from Iraq, because that's how these people know how to operate, because they're all special operation forces and they have background as shock troops for the American Empire, right? They honed these skills in Iraq, Afghanistan, Yugoslavia, and Africa, where Mali and Congo, and where else? All of like the sub-Saharan belt.
Sub-Saharan belt, basically.
But so that's how they're operating now against these anarchists, and by abducting them and throwing them in black sites.
Yeah, because it serves a twofold thing. One, you isolate the protesters, right? You get information out of them. Two, you terrify. You use terrorism essentially to scare the other protesters, right? Mm-hmm. It's sending a message. It's saying, stop protesting or you might disappear.
Mm-hmm. But then people come back. And tens of thousands of people have come back. So over the weekend, they burnt the Alameda Courthouse where the Black Panthers took over back in the 60s. Mm-hmm. Where they lit a fire in the lobby. They didn't really burn it down. Fox News wants you to believe that. What else happened? In Seattle, they had riots.
Yep.
Aurora, and then a protester was shot. Protester Grant was shot by a right-wing militant. And then in Richmond, one of the Boogaloo Boys, one of the right-wing white supremacist ones, co-opted a rally and burnt the truck himself and caused an incredible backlash of violence from the Richmond Police Department. They were pulling people off their porches in front of their houses, pulling people out of their cars, just bystanders, and arresting them and throwing them in unmarked vans. Just blatant violence against not protesters, but against the community. It was a reaction against the community, telling them, step down, we're at our wits' end. This is now our last resort. We've tried the hearts and minds route. We've tried co-opting the rallies, and we've tried increasing or diminishing the elements of COVID on the community. And we've tried answering the contradictions in your community. So now we're resorting to overt violence, like we talked about before. And now you have...
It's not quite overt yet. They're taking the people into prisons, and then they can beat them.
Yeah, pulling bystanders out of their houses is pretty overt.
It is pretty overt.
Some crystal knot shit. But then now we have the Federal Protective Services, their quick reaction forces deploying to Richmond, and now you have Black Hawks circling protests around Richmond. Mm-hmm. So Richmond's probably going to be a hot spot in the next few weeks. But other than that, I mean... Yeah, we also learned Umbrella Man was a white supremacist.
Oh yeah, Umbrella Man. We predicted that.
Or I'm gonna go out ahead and call him Domestic Gladio.
Domestic Gladio.
Domestic Gladio. It's like an Electric Avenue, but
I mean, like, we predicted it though. We said from the start, this guy's a fucking spook. Mm-hmm. This guy's a fucking right winger. He's just trying to incite violence. So and we're right.
Now, like you have in Italy, like we talked about before. With their Gladio program, you had the right wing being the vanguard of the fascist state, or the imperialist state. So NATO would implement right wing paramilitaries to attack leftists and force and repress them to the extent where they could not attain political power. So now we're seeing the separated covert arm of the intelligence structure of our government attack leftists and cause violence and instigate violence to implement government repression based on that. as a casus belli. And we know from just the FBI's reports, like, oh, white supremacy is the biggest issue in America right now, but also the fact that every single white supremacist attack in the past 20 years, past 30 years, every single one of them have been, well, not every single one, but the vast majority of them have been FBI assets. Even the ones who failed. Like every week you hear a story, oh, the FBI stops a terrorist using honeypots. So all these FBI honeypot assets are, and they're still assets, and they're still guided by the FBI and the intelligence services, and they are operating now as the extant wing of the government oppression.
Using it to justify more and more government oppression.
And it doesn't have to be overt. Like, you don't have to have the New York Times tell you, oh, these white supremacists are connected to the FBI. We know as a fact that the police interact and assist and aid white supremacists, like we saw in 2018 with the Patriot Prayer rally, where the lieutenant behind the quick reaction brigade of the Portland police was directly interacting with Joey Gibson and getting intelligence from him. And Joey Gibson told him that Antifa was flanking us, so you need to get them out. And the police attacked and shot Antifa in the head with rubber bullets.
Or, you see them working with Proud Boys.
Direct engagement.
Right? Or the 3%ers.
And you even see them holding up the white power sign now, too.
Yeah.
And the FBI even said 20 years ago, and 10 years ago, too, there's an extreme possibility where there's an extreme threat of white supremacists infiltrating law enforcement.
Yeah. Which is why we need to get more leftists infiltrating the military and government assets. Can you imagine, though? Like,
kind of entryism, but I mean...
Can you imagine, though, like, you receive, like, a text from an asset from the FBI saying, like, government forces moving in at this direction at this time.
Right, spies.
Spies, yeah. Counterintelligence.
Or maybe even, I don't know, some blanket, widespread, unilateral organization to assist with the homeless crisis that's coming in 1 month.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really shocked that, like, there hasn't been, like I know I haven't been organizing anything around it, but, like, no one else has either. Like, there's no already out there organization assisting with these eviction forces.
I mean, it's because, like, it's crazy. I mean, it's like America, it's like what happened in Vietnam, right? We were losing the war in Vietnam, so we just sort of moved the goalpost back, or say that we won and we just sort of ignore the problem. We're doing that with COVID, right? We tried 2 months of half-hearted sort of quarantining, and then we're like, yeah, COVID's over. We're done. We're not going to deal with it anymore. It's over. We did 2 months of quarantining, like all the other countries.
But I'm talking about leftists, though, like any kind of dual power entity.
So we actually have a couple of comrades who are organizing around the country fighting against the COVID. It's happening. I know a couple of my comrades are trying that.
But I know if like we were... If we were like in a revolutionary state now, not just approaching the conditions for a revolutionary state, a state of conditions, we would have this kind of blanket unilateral force across the country.
Oh yeah.
So,
I mean, that's man. You want a countrywide process with this much leftist infighting?
I know that's the people were saying like right after Minneapolis and all the protesters, and now with Portland protesters being thrown in vans. It's like we're unprepared, but that's the thing. It's like we're approaching the atrophy of the state. We're not necessarily at the revolutionary condition yet.
I mean, here's the problem. We're also in the heart of capitalism. Like this is where capitalism is the strongest.
We're at the core.
The core, and
hegemonic core.
I feel as though, in all seriousness, right? I think that America will be the last country to fall to socialism. Right? It's not going to happen here until basically most of the world has fallen. I think that all we can do as leftists in America is weaken the American empire.
And because we're really not seeing enough. I mean, this is something that's going to be happening over the next 10 years, but there's no like widespread working class native action going on.
Yeah.
So there's no real good sense among like the lower strata and what is that guy called? The subaltern. So there's no like natural action among the subaltern. We're still in. There's no
working class. There's no working class consciousness.
Yeah. So there's no Well, we're still in the primordial state, the primordial ooze of like a revolutionary state.
We have degraded into that again. I mean, like, you know, the problem is, you know, we can't even agree if China is good or bad. You know, which they are.
Well, I feel like the next 10 years of atrophy are going to convince people that.
Yeah. No, I think the problem is we've become so cucked by like American talks of like anti-revolution and anti-violence that we act like there are leftists who legitimately believe that countries like, you know, like Cuba are bad because they shot gay people.
Oh, like Agent Evans.
Yeah, it was so full of...
Robert Evans. He's one of the biggest live streamers in Portland right now. He's an anarchist who... He's one of the He's one of the Bellingcat journalists. So remember we talked about Iran in our Iran episode that we mentioned earlier in this episode? We talked about Bellingcat and their reports about the Iranian shoot-down. And the entirety of their reports was just some half-assed retweets of sketchy Twitter videos from like Iran and just random like 360p lights dazzling in the sky over Tehran. And that's the extent of their journalism. They call themselves open source intelligence, right? So it's basically just a Twitter grift.
God, I fucking
and
hate
this guy on Twitter recently has been saying, this guy Robert Evans, he calls himself an anarchist, and he's been saying, I've directly interacted with the police before. There was a right-wing group that I was surveilling, and I messaged the FBI, and I was one of their assets to oust these right-wingers.
Oh, just like, fuck.
Whoa, hold on there, buddy.
Are you saying you work with the FBI?
And you're an anarchist?
God.
And, so...
To the wall with you, comrade.
Even a couple anarchists I'm mutuals with, like, real anarchists, are like, who the fuck is this grifter? But you know how like the Supreme Court has legal tests that you can test, like what is it? If is abortion something that we can legislate, right? Or is if you talk about freedom of speech, like there's a test like a legal test, a 3-tier legal test that you can have to determine whether or not someone's freedom of speech is violated. So there's a test that you could have or do that determines if someone's a comrade or a real anarchist, right? So, do they believe in communalism? Do they operate like outside of even the periphery of the state and build dual power? And do they absolutely reject any type of interaction with the authoritarian state apparatus or any state apparatus, right? So, Robert Evans, he interacts with the state. Right, works with the state. He lives in a high-end loft, a really high tower loft in Portland. So he doesn't necessarily believe or act in a degree of communalism.
Yep.
He still interacts directly with the state, regardless of who he's interacting with the state in opposition to. And he also directly interacts with the state propaganda apparatus because he has a corporate podcast on iHeartRadio. So he fails incredibly the anarchist comrade test.
So he's just a corporate couple.
Yeah, he's a corporate... No, he's a COINTELPRO asset.
Corporate asset.
Corporate COINTEL asset. So that's why, Robert, Agent Evans, you are not a comrade.
Put a little stamp sign up there.
Boom.
Denied.
Yeah, denied. But I mean, I'm not going to say the handles, but I mean, like real anarchists, they like flew out bombs. And the guys we used to hang out with at your house who kind of drift around the country or even set up like small communities and like lofts or warehouses in Oakland.
Or buses.
Yeah, just buses and feed the homeless, and the entirety of their life is dedicated to this. Like their actual existence and consciousness is dedicated to building power outside of the state. Mm-hmm. And the total extent of their public presence is maybe like a couple posts on Instagram from their like folk punk album and some pictures of them playing banjo or something.
Yeah, I mean,
making hot dogs for homeless people.
Oh my God, fucking. Here's the thing with anarchists, right? Those people that you're talking about.
Well, those are real anarchists.
Those are real anarchists, but you know what? Their entire foundation for their society is basically asking each other to loan them $20. Like, I cannot remember how many times one of those people has hit me up and be like, hey, I was train hopping through Nebraska and I got kicked off the train and now I need $20 so I can go buy food.
I did buy him $70 of pizza a couple years ago.
Yeah. I've given them money. Like, you know, I'm a communist. I gotta donate a little bit of money to my anarch-kitty.
I mean, if
my anarch-kitty, you know, to make sure that they don't starve to death.
If they're the ones with the structure and the infrastructure to actually engage,
except they don't. That's the thing. They're reliant on hardworking communists like me to give them money.
All right, Dad.
God, when are you gonna grow up and work in the factory? Get a job.
Jesus.
Sorry, anarchists just piss me off.
All right, boomer.
You know what? Fuck you. Okay.
You know, this podcast is over.
You know what? Fuck you. You used to be a libertarian, so fuck you. All right, man.
Yeah, look where I am now.
That's right. I just fucking dropped the L-bomb on you.
I used to be some authoritarian.
Listen, man.
Right? I remember writing one of my research theses for, like, the end of high school or, like, early, like, college was about, like, working conditions in China. And my conclusion was that working conditions in China are totally created by American corporations. And here's why. It's because, like, Apple makes all this money and owns the Foxconn. They're the ones who bought the suicide nets. So really, it's America's fault that China has bad working conditions. I don't care about China. I just hate the American government and corporations. That was the extent of my, like, radicality back in, like, late high school, early college. It was just like, fuck America and the American government. I really had no conception of, like, capitalism or, like, how it interacted with, like, the rest of the world. But still, you know, I wasn't some Trotskyist Democrat.
Excuse you. Listen, I admit, I started out with Socialist Alternative. That was the DSA of my time. Because it was the one that everyone hears about, right?
Okay, no one cares. Let's get on to our next topic.
No, fuck you. Alright? But you either grow up, you know, fucking... It's like the reverse of the you either die or become something. You either die a fucking dirty Trotskyist, or you grow up and become an actual...
Or you split and make another Trotskyist Marxist-Leninist group.
Yeah, whatever the fucking bullshit, you know.
Like, how many... Like, what was he... Like, the Communist Party USA? Back in, like, 70 years ago? How many groups did they eventually split into? Like, 80, you know?
Like 8. Like, Workers' World. They're all the same.
Socialist Party.
Yeah.
PSL.
Oh, God. I mean, fucking Workers' World.
PSL is okay, but they have cops.
Yeah.
So does DSA.
So there's DSA. So, I mean, like, and, like, if they're not working with cops, they're making me fucking sell newspapers at the street corner.
Yeah.
Fuck that bullshit.
Buying a newspaper and they're in eternal servitude to you.
Yeah, like, how... I felt like a fucking... what's those Christians that knock door to door and fucking
Jesuits.
Not Jesuits.
No,
fuck, not Mormons.
Christian occultists. Christian occultists.
Hang on a second, I'm gonna Google this shit.
Jehovah's Witness.
I feel like a fucking Jehovah's Witness standing at the corner. Like, real... Like,
wait, you sold newspapers for them?
Yeah, I sold newspapers for Workers' World and CPUSA and Socialist Alternative, right? By the time I started with Socialist Alternative, and, like, I was fucking 18, 17, so I was like, oh boy, I'm doing real leftism, blah, blah, blah. After, like, a year of that, I was like, this is fucking boring. Moved on to, and then, you know...
Yeah, I spent my entirety, like, 17, 18, just calling Obama a war criminal.
Yeah, I mean, I did that too. But then by the time I got to Workers' World, and then they asked us to sell newspapers to fund their president, who was never going to get... Their presidential candidate, who was never going to get elected, I was like, fuck you guys, I'm not doing this shit anymore, and I just left.
Yeah. See, I'm kind of divided on voting for Joe Biden or Howie Hawkins. Honestly, I don't want to vote for Joe Biden just to see...
well, first of all...
What did our friend call him? Magantards something? No.
Magards, whatever.
I can't use my phone as camera.
Yeah.
But
listen,
whatever.
But the point is, well, for Biden, first of all, we live in New Jersey, right?
Voting Biden is accelerationism, I believe.
No, voting Trump is accelerationism, true acceleration.
No, because remember, the atrophy of America, the final reaction is going to be after the next Democrat.
After the next... No, here's what I think, though. First of all, we live in New Jersey. It doesn't fucking matter who you vote for. Right? They're gonna vote Democrat, no matter what. So fuck it. I'm voting Howie Hawkins because, frankly, if the Democratic Party doesn't earn my vote, they're not getting my fucking vote. And it's the Democratic Party's strategy of basically saying that we're not the Republican Party, so you should vote for us, that has led to basically them holding us hostage.
Well, they are the Republican Party now.
They're just the Republican Party 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Because fucking Bush started the drone strike program, and then Obama just kept it. But he, dialed it back a little bit.
Nancy Pelosi voted for the drone bombing program in prison and the NSA. But she voted against Iraq, but she's like, well, if they're there now, we should bomb them and kill them all.
Exactly. And you're seeing Biden fucking doing the same thing.
And she's from San Francisco. Who the fuck in San Francisco is voting for Nancy fucking Pelosi?
Well, hopefully they get her out.
Guys.
Hopefully they get her out.
Shit. Yeah, she needs to be primary.
Yeah.
Maybe more primary.
God, yes. And we're seeing what happened in with Biden right now with the protesters. Trump is throwing protesters in unmarked vans and shooting them with rubber bullets. And then Biden's like, well, you know what, son? Maybe we should just don't shoot them in the head. Shoot them in the leg,
That old punk anarchist got to be thrown in jail.
Yeah, we gotta hurt them, but at least what they say is have marked vans.
Break up the pool trees.
Yeah,
Joe Biden's police reform is just break out the pool trees.
Right?
Corn cob, you're getting it now.
Corn cob, you're getting it now. All right, so fuck the Democrat Party. I'm not voting for them. All right, the fucking Bernie Sanders was my compromise.
Yeah. It's over. Joe Biden.
Sorry,
but
friendship with the Democratic Party ended. Now, full state revolution is my best friend.
Yeah. Well, I think they're gonna break. I don't know. I don't fucking know. But there's nothing else we gotta cover about Portland anymore. So we know the FPS or shock troops of the American Empire.
They're not even actual federal agents. They're arresting people.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about Hong Kong and Hong Kong tactics.
Oh, I mean, the real thing is that the tactics that the CIA taught the Hong Kong rioters is now being applied in Portland, right?
Come back to life in the ass.
Yeah, umbrella barricades, balloons filled with paint.
The shields, they have phalanxes.
Yeah, they have phalanxes.
And if you noticed on Saturday, or Friday, if you were watching the protests, there was some lady saying, there's comrades in the gas down the street, upwind, right? You gotta come and help them. Aren't you gonna come and help them? Because they built their phalanx on, I think, southern side? And it's south to north winds, I think, of Portland. And I was like, oh, well, why are they all hiding out in the corner from all the other comrades on the other side of the courthouse? But I realized, oh, well, they're downwind. So that's why they built their phalanx there, in front of the 10,000 people behind them. Mm-hmm. Because all the tear gas is blown into the cops just naturally.
Yep.
And all the tear gas is being blown into the small group of protesters, up a little bit.
Yeah.
But they built their phalanx downwind. And I was like, oh, wow, that's a good tactic.
I mean, they're learning.
Yeah.
So we're going to see what happens.
A week, it was just okay, well, it just escalates. Mm-hmm. But you want to call a break right now?
Sure, let's take a break. We've talked for about a good 40 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be back right after these messages.
We should always stand up for peace, for democracy, for individual rights.
With all due respect, that's a bunch of malarkey.
And why is that so?
Because not a single thing he said is accurate. First of all...
Be specific.
I will be very specific. Number one, this lecture on embassy security. The congressman here, so much for the embassy security piece. Number two, Governor Romney, before he knew the fact, it was panned by the media around the world. And this talk about, I don't understand what my friend's talking about here. This is a president who's gone out. This is a guy who's follows us again. This is a guy who brought the entire world, including Russia and China, to bring about the most devastating efforts on Iran to make sure that they, in fact, stop with their... Look, I mean, these guys bet against America all the time.
Slate.
Okay.
All right, so what were we talking about before?
Basically FDS and how the federal government is hiring mercenaries to do their police work for them.
Privatized policing. That's always fun.
Yep. Anyway, so why don't you talk about our next subject?
Yeah. So, America's in collapse. The slow atrophy is eating away at our lives. I mean, things are different, of course, after COVID. Things kind of fell apart. I remember one of the most prominent discourses of the early COVID era, in like April. People were just talking about, oh wow, it's the end of the world, and I always thought it was going to look like Mad Max, but here I am in my pajamas watching Netflix, ordering Uber Eats from workers that you have to tip your Amazon workers, tip your Amazon driver. But yeah, it's kind of weird how in the collapse of America and just the collapse of, I guess, our old capitalism in general.
Yeah. Collapse of society, capitalist society.
Yeah, the collapse of society. Yeah, the collapse of neoliberal society is, well, to be cliche about it, ending not with a bang, but with a whimper. Like the T.S. Eliot, that old adage. But yeah, it's weird just seeing how nonchalant people are about it. We're all just going on in our everyday lives. There was traffic on Route 1 today. People are back. Some people are back at work. COVID pay's gone. It's like COVID never existed.
We just sort of, like Vietnam, we just sort of gave up.
Yeah, but this isn't
like Iraq and Afghanistan, we just sort of it's over. We just sort of stopped doing it. We just stopped caring.
Moved on.
Even though it's still happening.
We're done with trying. We've realized it's incompatible with our current system, and instead of changing the system, we're absolutely incapable of conceiving a different future.
Mm-hmm. It's like those people who say like, can 2020 just be over already? Not realizing that 2021 will simply repeat 2020 if we don't fix what's caused the problems of 2020.
December 31st, 11:59 p.m. just goes to 13/1/2020. January 2, 2020.
January 2, 2020.
2020 will never end. Because this is different than the long hot summer of 1968. This is different than the red hot summer. This is even different than Reconstruction era America. This is the collapse, and we're living through it. And we don't realize we're living through the collapse. Like it's like we always think of like retrofuturism with movies like Blade Runner, for example. Right? We can conceive the future. We can conceive the post-collapse. We can conceive the conditions in which societal change is right. We can conceive the androids that usurp the regular human and the end game of eugenics and over corporatism and over monopolistic fascism. But we're incapable of conceiving two things. And these two things are the march into collapse, the slow atrophy. We're also incapable of conceiving a better future for ourselves. Like our future is lost. That's why we always retract and react back to retrofuturism, is that there is no better future for us to conceive because it's absolutely incompatible with our entire past history. It's like with Blade Runner, you never know. You never see what led up to those conditions. You never see the slow march and what led to the end game. And even in the newest Blade Runner, where the androids are about to launch a revolution and finally earn their rights, you never see the slow edging towards the collapse.
The slow erosion of our rights and of our stands of living that leads to
the erosion of society. Mm-hmm. In Blade Runner, you see the leader of a corporation, like the Tyrell Corporation, Tyrell Corp and Wallace Corp. You see he's living in these grandiose palaces, and you see the allude to Japan, and like what we talked about with the anti-Japanese sentiment of the 80s, we always integrate those tendencies into modern futurism from the 80s specifically, because that's when we saw the change from like a Keynesian economic viewpoint to a more neoliberal free market privatization of our lives viewpoint, and really the reaction of public spending into the free market, and where economic agency is not vested in people. Economic agency is vested in the efficiency of the market to produce capital. So in Blade Runner, we see the end game of this. We see the total incompatibility, the total eminence of this contradiction, and the ending of this contradiction. But we never see the growing stagnation of that contradiction. Like, we don't know, like, why do we even think Deckard's a replicant, right? Like, we never see Deckard changing into a replicant. It's always an idea that's there. It's always this conscious thing that people are, even in Blade Runner, if you're able to think about it as a universe, in the Blade Runner universe, that's something people are able to conceive. But you never see the conditions that lead to people conceiving that, right? Because it's boring. I mean, right now, these protests are going to subside. We're not seeing any revolutionary mass movement. We're just seeing the protests ending, the government repressing the protests, the collapse of American society. I mean, we have 44% people, 44% of renters in New Jersey are facing eviction. Basically, the base rate across the country is 40 to 50%. That's 15 million people, dude. Like, 15 million people are going to be homeless. This is worse than the Great Depression. This is the collapse, you know?
It's like in, what was it, the classic sci-fi novel by Isaac Asimov.
Which one?
It's a book series known as...
iRobot?
No, not iRobot. Although, did you write iRobot?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was the...
Will Smith was in there.
Foundation. There you go. Foundation is this sci-fi novel about this galaxy-spanning empire, right? But however, after like centuries of stagnation, the empire is predicted that it would inevitably collapse, right? And it was predicted in the book by a social scientist that the empire would inevitably collapse, and due to stagnation. And I think that's what's happening to America, right? The 50s were a golden era of America because there was no other competition, and all these markets the markets that were abandoned by all these former imperialist empires like France and Britain and Germany were now ripe for the taking by America.
Well, they were in a process of consolidation. That consolidation was predicated on people moving into those markets. It wasn't predicated on increasing efficiency of production. It was predicated on increasing labor capacity.
And the spheres of influence. But after this, that was why the 70s were a golden era, because we weren't oppressing our own American working class. We were too busy focusing our energies and efforts and strategies outwards. Like in banana republics, like in Vietnam, like in Korea.
In order to do that, you need to mobilize your domestic workers.
Exactly.
Your domestic labor force in order to appropriate that capital from foreign economies.
Exactly. But there's only so far that you can expand with that empire. Eventually, we're going to run out of markets to expand into. After that, like we said earlier, the only option is to turn inwards. Start, like you said, start maximizing the efficiency of making capital, producing capital.
And that comes at diminishing the efficiency of preserving people. So that's why we have like the idea of like human capital that came around in like the 80s too. Like, we're not seen as people, we're seen as
resources.
Resources.
This is why HR says human resources.
Exactly. I don't even think HR was a thing before the 80s. The corporate America. Because that's really when corporate America started, was when these neoliberal reforms affected the whole world. And that's why the Soviet Union collapsed when we saw Tiananmen Square. Or we would have seen Tiananmen Square. What we think of Tiananmen Square as. It was from this restructuring of global capitalism. But it's really interesting, just like the consciousness of it, like how we even perceive the collapse, you know? Because like with the Roman Empire, it didn't collapse in like a couple of days. It didn't collapse when immigrants, the barbarians invaded Rome. Yeah, and Rome didn't end then either. It continued on in some sense with the Byzantines.
Or even like the Western Romans didn't end the first time the barbarians invaded. There are multiple invasions, right? But what we don't even see,
like 200 years.
Exactly. But what we don't see is the sort of shifts in power and wealth and the instability that caused before the barbarians advanced that led to the opportunity for the barbarians to invade Rome.
Even Venice was only a thing like in the 700s because of people fleeing the capital, or just resources, not because capital wasn't really a thing then, but just resources fleeing Rome, or Rome proper, into northern Italy.
Yep.
That's when Venice became a thing. That's when we kind of had to shift into feudal mercantilism, sort of. It was like primordial mercantilism in Venice.
Yeah. Like a more sort of microcosm example of this is like you ever notice how the products that you buy today are noticeably shittier than the stuff that you bought as a kid?
iPhones,
right?
Yeah.
iPhones, or like even simpler, food, right? The cereal that you buy today is worse, or the food, you know,
dude, they got rid of the fucking shapes and tricks.
Exactly.
Like 5 years ago.
The shapes that
Remember
you
when
buy.
that happened?
Yeah, the cereal that you buy today is worse than the ones that you bought as a kid, but you never notice it when it's happening, like because they do it in small bits. They cut a little bit corner there. A little bit less marshmallows in your Lucky Charms here. They cut out one of the shapes there, right? And you don't notice it as it's happening because it's so small until you look back 20 years later and you realize that the Lucky Charms of today is way shittier than the Lucky Charms of yesteryear.
Well, but you notice like when Trix changes like the shape of their cereal, but you don't notice the ingredients changing. You don't notice the branding changes. You don't notice they take an ounce out here and there.
Yep.
They shift production around and consolidate different types of cereals. You know, you don't notice Lucky Charms. You get like one that's fewer marshmallow, and then all of a sudden you see like Hershey bars are slightly smaller, or the price increases slightly. Reese's Cups get a little smaller. The M&M bags get a little smaller. Your Doritos, they put a little more nitrogen in the bag. You know, it's this gradual change. It's because we're not really conditioned to perceive like this change.
Yeah.
Like we only really notice like 9/11. We see great changes when Subway changes their $5 footlong to $6. We see that, but we don't see them changing the composition of the bread slightly over a couple of years. You don't
one less slice of meat, or maybe they cut the meat a little thinner. You don't notice those little changes. Yeah. And you don't notice the little changes in America.
Time and space is kind of annihilated when when you kind of have to find the new avenues for revenue and profit. You know, so even like our, what is it?
Even in like
1988, like kind of like people were saying, this is the reconstructioning is actually like a deconstruction of America.
Because like the sort of breakdown of American society into like its core aspects
culture
and
too,
destroying it.
Yeah, and culture. Because, like, you think about the 60s and the 70s. The 70s were, you had a great shift. We were off the gold standard and we kind of floated our currency. Because we shifted from industrial market that was focused on producing goods to a more overt financial market. So now, by floating our dollar, we floated our production too. And that's when we started seeing that shift. That's when Nixon went into China with Deng, and he started trading with China and kind of reinvigorating American financial capacity by funding Chinese production. And now we see China is now shifting toward that too by outsourcing their production capacity to like Malaysia and Africa. Although they have different mechanisms, but they're still outsourcing production and capital to foreign nations and really appropriating capital from foreign nations. They're still a capitalist country, but it's different mechanisms and a different ideology structure behind that restructuring of Chinese capital. You know, so it's like we don't notice. Like now we notice the collapse, right, with COVID. And
COVID has, if it weren't for COVID, we would not have noticed it.
No, we would still be in the same conditions in 10 years and in next year, regardless. Because, I mean, 2008 was another crest, but still, the conditions that led to the 2008 financial collapse were still prevalent. Even if the financial collapse didn't happen, like, we still would have created this corporate debt bubble. And that corporate debt bubble we have now, where it's like 60% of actual GDP is like, I think, just debt. It's 60% of like our entire economy doesn't exist. And that came after. We didn't notice that happening until like now, until COVID kind of hit all these corporations in the side with a bullet. And it kind of pop the bubble a little bit, and still we see the down going up. I mean, that has no relevancy for like the actual economy or the actual conditions of the country. Like the entire economy is just floating and it's just expanding in this bubble, and it has no relevancy. And we're still floating our capacity and expanding it based on absolutely nothing, making it up.
So what does that mean for the future then?
Well, it means, 10 years is going to be a totally different America than we see now. I mean, it's in decline pretty much. I mean, what do you think?
I think that one day we're going to wake up and realize that, it's been months since we contacted friends or family. As our hours gradually get longer, our pay gradually gets worse and worse, and we come home a little bit later every single day, but we won't notice it as it's happening, right? Until one day, 10 years later, we wake up and realize we have no close relationships because our work has replaced relationships in our lives. That's something that's happening now. Yeah. Even. I mean, like the corporate culture is a direct it's a direct reaction and product and strategy at the same time of sort of trying to alienate workers and basically replace work as a social aspect of human life.
It's not even in the Japanese sense. It's just the total envelopment of our entire lives into this great capitalist spectacle.
Yeah. Like this isn't something that's happening around the world. People in China and people around, even Europe, their lives don't revolve around work. And that's something that like we as Americans have been so gaslighted into believing that, working all your life and then you can enjoy like your retirement for like your last 15 fucking years.
Now people don't retire.
And now we don't even retire anymore.
You have people that are 70 years old working 10-hour shifts at Amazon.
Yeah.
So much for the American dream. And it's not like we can retract against this. Like, it's not like we can be like, oh, well, let's re-implement public spending, kind of cut work hours. That'll fix capitalism. Because it's the natural tendency of the economy to do this. Like, the only reason why we shift to this more corporate model is because we have no more avenues of profitability in American production.
Yeah. It is an inevitable trend of capitalism that this will happen. And we can delay it by implementing more safety features and social safety.
Doesn't that just increase suffering?
In the long term, I mean, we're seeing what happens in countries like Britain that have social health care, right?
Yeah.
It just gets gradually chipped away at, right? A little bit here, a little bit, you pay a little bit more there for some medication, and you don't notice it until one day, 10 years later, you realize, hey, the NHS fucking sucks, the National Healthcare Service.
And then they cut it because it sucks.
Yeah, it's so bad they just cut it, and then you're like, well, what happened?
They create this like alternate reality then, slowly. We could go on all day and how the government actively creates this alternate reality through different mechanisms of propaganda. And remember, the CIA directly funds movies and writes articles for the New York Times. And that's a fact. That's not something like you could really dispute. It's not a conspiracy. That's an overt fact that they shape our cultural consciousness. And the entire thing just kind of works to slowly, gradually increase profitability, but also decrease just our standard of living, just decrease our capacity to be human, you know?
Yep.
And as like these kind of tensions like build up, we don't really notice it because we're still going in our like daily lives, you know? And eventually it'll reach a peak, but it'll still just gradually
There's no change day to day
Yeah.
until you accept through when you look back.
Every day I've seen like your active kind of
Yeah.
like motion of revolutionary change.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't even know how that's possible because for some people, you see like right-wingers now today, like no matter what you tell them, they'll believe that COVID's caused by demon sperm, or there's demon sperm that like I don't even know what this discourse is about.
Or it's just fake.
Yeah, because like people can live in these alternate realities, and it doesn't matter because the alternate realities still guide like their actions and still guide like their policy that they create. And like no matter what, like even if they live in the alternate reality, it doesn't matter because their consciousness is so intrinsic to the current conditions that they are incapable of perceiving the world otherwise.
So what does it mean then? What's the point?
So no matter what we do, like a lot of people are still just going to see everything as normal because we still act as everything is normal.
Okay.
Or we still act that Trump is, like some people still act that Trump is legitimately fighting the deep state.
Okay.
Right? Or we still think that Hillary Clinton is running an occultist sex ring. We know that's true, but Trump's also in on it.
Yeah.
And just these gradual contradictions, or these contradictions kind of gradually become more prevalent and people's consciousness shift. But that can go two ways. So you can either become a violent reactionary or it would eventually disintegrate into a revolution. So that's where like fascism comes from. And fascist...
So you're saying either, as in like, where are the two... So before us now, from we see what we have now, what is the future, right? The road splits into two directions. What are they?
I think it's one direction. I think in 5 years, it's going to be very violent and very overt. And we're going to see these violent reactionaries really take a gripping hold on American politics. Because that's where you see like the consciousness splitting. That's where you see the disintegration of consciousness coming from these gradual increase in the more prevalency and precarity of these contradictions in American society. And as the contradictions become more prevalent, people react violently to their consciousness disintegrating before them. So that's
what was that just fascism?
Well, yeah.
Okay. What's the other path then?
Revolution. But I don't think that people are capable of realizing a revolution before they realize fascism. Or America is capable of realizing a revolution before we realize overt fascism.
So you think things have to get worse before they get better?
I think they are.
Okay.
Yeah. So that kind of sums it up, really. As consciousness erodes away, the violence will only increase. Because people are incapable of reconciling with the current contradictions in American society.
Okay.
Yeah. We got a lot to talk about for the future.
As we document the slow collapse of American society,
slow atrophy,
and capitalist society in general.
So join us next week when we jump off a bridge or something. I don't know. I'm gonna go jump on a ship and sail out to Ireland and claim asylum.
You know? Form the new socialist republic.
No, I don't know. I'll just live with my uncle.
Just live with your uncle?
Yeah. I really should have gotten that Irish citizenship a couple of years ago, man. I don't know what I'm going to do now.
Hey, listen, China is always welcoming us.
Yeah.
China is the bright future of socialism.
I don't know, unless what is it? Port's open. We're kind of stuck here.
Oh, man. They have to open it up eventually, right?
Yeah, eventually.
Or we could always just run to Cuba.
Sure.
Viva la Cuba.
Yeah, next podcast will be hosted in Havana.
Oh, that'd be dope.
I'm on a public park, though, because they don't have Wi-Fi in the buildings. Look, real quick before we go, my brother was saying something about Havana, and apparently in Havana, since they don't have good internet, and the internet's like a public utility, and it's only really available in public spaces, and it's not really connected to the rest of the world, they built a massive intranet system in Havana that links all of the buildings together using LAN cables. So they essentially built the world's largest LAN party across all of Havana, so they can like play Halo and Call of Duty together.
Oh, that's awesome!
It's insane.
Yeah.
I think it's like they all just we don't play Call of Duty, so we're gonna build our own internet.
Yeah.
Keeping government had nothing to do with it too.
That's
so
awesome.
Like we're just gonna build our intranet.
Yeah.
Intra, not inter.
Viva la Wi-Fi.
Viva la
Call of
Duty.
Yes, la Wi-Fi.
La Wi-Fi.
All right. Well, you want to extra out us? Extra us?
Yeah, so
the outro.
Negotiated management. We hope you enjoyed our episode about the gradual decay and atrophy of American society. And we'll see you next week if we're all still alive.
All right.
We probably will be, but slightly more bored.
All right. Peace.
Peace.